Good morning, everyone. It is August 10th, Thursday, and time for the AM edition of C2-A-Days. Today, hopefully a little bit quicker show, but wanted to offer a rundown of some interesting notes from the group of five level. Sometimes these, of course, can be overlooked. Some programs obviously don't receive quite the level of in-depth coverage as many of the Power Five programs that we discussed at length last night and do in most episodes of this show. But wanted to take some time and discuss some of the things I've been reading over the last 24 hours or so that might have an impact on college fantasy football, or of course as we get prepared for the season itself. At Colorado State, Kevin Lytle of the Fort Collins Coloradoan offered three takeaways from the Rams' most recent scrimmage. The biggest potential impact player discussed was Kobe Johnson, the running back, who, according to Lytle, the early eye test matches the resume. If you aren't familiar with Johnson, he's a transfer from North Dakota State, ran for over 2,500 yards in his career, 4 seasons at the FCS level. He has 1 year of eligibility, and because of the uncertainty surrounding Avery Morrow, who is the starting running back and one of really only 2 bright spots for the Rams offensively last season, there's a chance that Johnson's going to be the top ball carrier in Fort Collins this year, because as we mentioned earlier, I believe it was last week, there were some reports out of Colorado that Morrow is practicing with the team, but sounds like it's not yet cleared to play this fall. So we're of course monitoring that situation, but Colorado State, knowing they had a potential issue at the running back position, went out, got Johnson, and it sounds like he is impressing. There's a quote from Jay Norvell, reported by Lytle, that, quote, "Kobe's going to be a really good player for us. He's just so natural at the position. He's got experience. He understands how to run." There was also mention of junior college transfer KJ Edwards, who has reportedly been had a strong camp. There was a fumble apparently from Edwards during the scrimmage, but also showed potential according to Lytle. And then Lytle, of course, mentioned a player that I'm sure a lot of CFF folks, especially thinking in dynasty terms, are interested to know, that true freshman running back Damian Henderson was highlighted by Norvell for his physical running ability. At Wyoming, there was a little bit of good news, but more bad news, unfortunately, for the Pokes. Running back DQ James was cleared to return to practice, according to Cody Tucker of 7220 Sports. That was on Wednesday, but then Alex Taylor of Wyo Sports reported that DeWyan McNeely, who was the projected starter for week 1, if not the entire season, suffered an apparent knee injury on Wednesday. Taylor reported that head coach Greg Bowles said, quote, "We'll find out on him. I feel for him. He's gone through so many injuries, but obviously we wouldn't be pulling an MRI as soon as possible if we weren't concerned about some of the initial indicators." So with Harrison Whaley already out, expected to miss, it sounds like at least 2 games, according to earlier reports. DQ James, having been banged up, back and hopefully close to 100%. But, if you miss a chunk of the early fall practice, will James be ready to carry a very heavy workload early in the season? Not sure. And then with, of course, McNeely, who was penciled in atop the depth chart to start the season, potentially suffering a significant injury that could severely impact his availability this year. That's gone from a deep running back group to a pretty thin one very quickly at Wyoming. At New Mexico, there was an interesting report we've heard. I've mentioned before on this show, I'm sure you've read other places, including a pretty big one at Washington, where Michael Penix Jr. Has been resting for a few days. New Mexico has an established starter now, and Dylan Hopkins, the transfer from UAV, followed his former head coach and offensive coordinator there to New Mexico, won the job in spring practice. But according to Sean Ryder of the Albuquerque Journal, Devin Dampier took snaps with the number one offense most recently in practice. Sophomore DC Tabscott was with the twos. Junior Justin Holiday with the threes. Dylan Hopkins was standing off to the side and did not take a single rep. Said that Hopkins was dressed in full pads, was watching closely, paying close attention, but for the first practice in 6 months, as he had gone out west, did not make a single handoff or throw a single pass in practice, according to head coach Danny Gonzalez on Wednesday. This was after the practice on Wednesday. Says, quote, "I've shut Dylan down. Dylan's thrown about 1,000 balls, and we know what Dylan can do. So I want to get some of those other guys some reps with the first team and the second team." So according to Gonzalez and Reader, the plan appears to be Hopkins will not practice again until Monday. That's 5 full days of rest, and then should, according to plan, be back next week as the Lobos prepare for the September 2nd opener against Texas A&M. So not necessarily worried about Hopkins being ready for the season. Mentioned the similarity to Penix there because there is a little bit of unease right now. Is that something that's going to impact Michael Penix, who's a Heisman Trophy candidate potentially? But this is something, getting into the process of making these videos every day, twice a day, reading 3 times as much as we actually mention here. This isn't uncommon right now. It's something that I'm not used to, don't remember hearing a whole lot about or seeing a whole lot about in previous years. But, perhaps this is something that's going to become more and more common, giving veteran players a little bit of day off, a little bit of rest every once in a while, a day off here and there, a little bit more professional approach than perhaps what we've been used to at the collegiate level. So just some interesting to note that there are teams who want to get younger guys reps, as we've mentioned plenty before, but also trying not to tax these quarterbacks, especially if they have established themselves as the top guy on the depth chart. At Ball State, Gus Martin of the Muncie Star Press had a nice feature on the running back position for the Cardinals. Marquez Cooper, somebody I'm personally very, very high on from a CFF standpoint so far this year. Martin mentioned that Cooper said he was, quote, underutilized as a receiver when he was at Kent State. Recently, Cooper, joined the Cardinals from MAC rival Kent State earlier this year. He had just 18 catches for 189 yards and 0 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, during that time of which he ran for 1,200 yards or more each year. Carson Steele, who transferred, of course, from Ball State to UCLA, caught 29 passes for 166 yards and a touchdown last season alone. So the expectation is that Cooper will have more of an opportunity to show what he can do as a pass catcher. And according to Cooper, and he thinks that the coaching staff really want to do that. He says, quote, "They really want to do that. I think it's really going to help me with going to the next level. So that's going to be a good thing for the team and me." There was a note here, something I missed. I think Cooper apparently had surgery for appendicitis back in April. But he is back and fully healthy, it sounds like, this fall. There were also plenty of positive notes on Von Pemberton, who appears to be the clear number 2, also takes some reps with the ones, unsurprisingly. Also, apparently, there have been times when both running backs are on the field at the same time. Pemberton, according to Martin, flashed his unique blend of size and quickness during the team's spring game and has only built on that momentum since. There were other quotes with Cooper talking about his teammates. He mentioned specifically Rico Barfield has impressed. But there also was a note that true freshman Christian Davis, who apparently was having an impressive start to his college career, suffered what appears to be a lower body injury earlier this week, was seen on crutches and with a new knee brace, according to Martin. There was no official diagnosis or report as to whether or not Davis is going to miss a significant chunk of time. Crutches don't always mean ACL or broken bone or something like that, but certainly a little bit of a further step than just a guy sitting out a practice. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, because I know that there were some notes in this piece that Davis was off to a good start. At Tulsa, Caden McFarland of KJRH TV in Tulsa tweeted a couple of interesting reports, some videos, because there's quite a lot of turnover at Tulsa, especially the offensive skill positions, the move to Kevin Wilson as head coach. Other than the quarterback position and top wide receiver, a lot of other pieces of that offensive depth chart need to sort of take shape. So Braylon Braxton, unsurprisingly, has been the top quarterback. It sounds like, according to McFarland, that Cardell Williams has become his top backup. But Malachi Jones being, expected to be the top wide receiver there, he's certainly the most experienced, played a little over 50% of snaps last year. Just about everybody else in our team profiles, projected depth charts, was at 4% or fewer. So Tulsa is one of the least experienced wide receiver groups in the country. Didn't really hit the transfer portal hard, although they did bring in Braylon Presley, who listed as a running back in the spring, apparently has been getting quite a few reps at wide receiver. He played closer to 5% of snaps, so is a little bit more of a veteran even than others. But according to this report from McFarland, Nick Rampert has sort of established himself as the number 2 wideout there at Tulsa. There is also, apparently, according to McFarland, a pretty clear 1-2 punch at running back. Anthony Watkins, I believe we mentioned earlier this month, has taken a lot of reps with the number 1 unit, but apparently Jordan Ford is also practicing with the ones, and perhaps that'll be sort of a shared workload between those 2 senior running backs. At Fresno State, a lot of interesting notes on Barkboard from Jackson Moore, as always. He gave a lot of detail on the running back situation, which really hasn't changed. We've talked about it before, but he did kind of an interesting thing with running backs and receivers, where he put them into tiers, sort of, how we might expect playing time to go, but also, some of their physical traits and talent abilities, things like that. Mentioned that Malik Sherrod is the quickest of the group. He, of course, is in tier 1 for the running backs. And this was the first note I've mentioned as far as a projected workload, but more speculated or mentioned that 10 to 15 carries seem to be his expectation, that Elijah Gilliam and Cal transfer Damian Moore were also in that tier 1, but also mentioned that Moore has missed time with injury. So Sherrod would expect is going to be the top ball carrier, 10 to 15 carries per game, maybe a little lighter than what we've seen out of Fresno State in the past. But Sherrod, as we've mentioned, is listed at 173 pounds, a little lighter than the running backs that have been there as well. So not a major surprise that Gilliam would be in the mix more if he is back and fully healthy. So it's probably not going to be, the running back position specifically, and Sherrod being that top guy, might not be putting up quite the level of production that we've seen from Bulldogs running backs there in the past. Pretty interesting note, especially from a CFF standpoint, because Josiah Freeman, I know there was a mention, Eric Froton of NBC Sports Edge was at the NFL Combine earlier this year, asked Jake Hayner who he thought the next man up at wide receiver would be for Fresno State. Hayner mentioned Josiah Freeman, who is a redshirt freshman, didn't really play last year, but in part because of that comment, but also some feelings and other things around the program that Freeman really is a talented player. He's sort of risen to become the top drafted in CFF drafts, best balls, things of that nature. Freeman has not been overrated, but has been the highest drafted player for the most part. But according to Moore, Freeman is in the tier 2 lottery tickets category, so separated from tier 1 wide receivers Eric Brooks, Magdalena, Jalen Gill, and Mikael Barkley. Gill and Barkley being incoming transfers. So just a little bit interesting note to there. Freeman, I think, still has plenty of potential. He is a sophomore, but hasn't quite had an opportunity just yet. And it sounds like a little bit more experienced players, Delina and Brooks being the most experienced there at Fresno State specifically. Delina got about 25% of snaps last year, Brooks 35. But as we've said earlier, Jalen Gill already coming in, getting a lot of reps with the number 1 offense in the slot position, also taking a few carries out of the backfield, it sounded like. And then Barkley, veteran player as well. Those two guys have 64 career games played between them and over 20 starts, both at Power 5 programs. So it could be a little bit before Freeman establishes himself in that top group. But we will, of course, just sort of have to see. At James Madison, Noah Fleischman of the Daily News Herald gave an in-depth rundown of the wide receiver situation. Of course, a lot of people are interested in how the quarterback position will shake out at James Madison, given how productive that offense was last year. A big part of that was, Chris Thornton was one of the better wide receivers at the Group of 5 level. He, of course, has moved on and wasn't the only one. The most experienced player returning in that group is Reggie Brown, and played about half of the snaps, has 7 starts in his career, had a good season last year, 400 yards. Probably, most would expect to be the number 1 option this season. Peyton Hunter is the only other player who recorded a statistic out of the James Madison receivers last year. So JMU hit the transfer portal pretty hard, brought in Phoenix Sproles from North Dakota State, also brought in South Florida wide receiver Omarion Dollison and Elijah Surratt from St. Francis in Pennsylvania. And we've actually seen kind of a little bit of a string of St. Francis receivers transferring up to the FBS level and playing pretty well. So I know that Surratt early in CFF drafts was kind of the top or behind Brown in most cases, next wide receiver drafted. But it sounds like, at least according to this write-up, Surratt wasn't really mentioned much. Brown specifically noted that Dollison is, quote, the fastest on the team. He noted that Sproles is speedy as well, but has a high football IQ. And then another name of note that coaches were quoted as being impressed with so far is Tajee Hudson, who has played 24 career games at the FBS level at East Carolina. Has not produced very much statistically, but sounds like the coaching staff was impressed that he was able to come in, get acclimated quickly, prepare for fall camp, get up to speed, and so far has done well. But Brown, quote here, from Fleischman says, "I feel like we're versatile. They're moving us around. We've got speed, we've got strength, we've got size. I feel like this is one of our best receiving cores. in a couple of years, but we just have to bring it together. Everybody's got to be on the same page. And then head coach Kirk Cignetti said of Brown, because for the most part, the piece focused on, what else, didn't necessarily highlight Brown, even though it seems like he's going to be the top guy. But quote toward the end from Cignetti says, I think Reggie's done a nice job in fall camp, but we expect him to. He's the veteran of that group, and he's done well. So, not a ton of specific insight, who's getting what reps or anything like that. And quite honestly, this piece is probably an example of what we're going to get a little bit more the closer we get to week 0 and week 1, as the teams probably are going to lock down access a little bit more. We're going to get some interviews here and there, but fewer practice observations probably. If that's the case, just sort of a housekeeping note, we'll see how the 2-A-Days setup for us is. If there's just not enough out there, maybe we scale back a little bit. But we'll see. Until there's a need, we'll continue to be here for you twice a day on that note. Finishing up a few Sun Belt teams. At Arkansas State, A State Nation, the site that covers Arkansas State as well as anyone, tweeted yesterday that the Red Wolves added former UCF safety Justin Hodges. He was a one-time Ole Miss commit, also committed to UCF, as mentioned here, and was expected to play quite a bit. I was ready to put him immediately into the 2 deep at UCF and thought he had a chance to start. So if he's able to come into Arkansas State, cleared to play immediately, would expect that he'll factor in defensively. At South Alabama, Craig Stevenson of AL.com highlighted 15 players who will be 6th-year super seniors for the Jaguars this fall. I personally pretty high on South Alabama. Think that, obviously last year they were a 10-win team, took a huge step forward. They rank very high in returning production. The CFB Winning Edge returning production numbers have South Alabama number 2 overall, 9th on offense, 3rd on defense. Obviously a very veteran group, more than a dozen 6-year super seniors, 21 seniors total, according to Stevenson. And of course, not all of those players have been in the program their entire career. USA has hit the transfer portal, recruited junior colleges as well. But some of the, players that they're really going to lean on, like quarterback Carter Bradley, running back LaDainian Webb, several defensive starters are 6-year guys with a lot of experience. So at the group of 5 level, to me, that is a real positive. Think that's going to potentially be the difference if you're looking at South Alabama versus Troy, for example, and the Sun Belt title. The CFB Winning Edge team strength projections actually have Troy as our highest rated Sun Belt team, but me personally, and I don't usually let my opinion drive things too much. I like to sit back and let the numbers do their thing. But I think just sort of the veteran makeup there at South Alabama might be enough that they might be my personal pick to win the Sun Belt. At UAB, who, of course, has most recently moved from Conference USA to the American, we mentioned a note earlier in the week from the official website there at UAB about the depth at the running back position. It's a little vague, mentioned a lot of different players by name, but did want to note that Evan Dudley followed up, also of AL.com on Wednesday, that Isaiah Jacobs, the junior college transfer who started his career at Maryland, is reading from Dudley's piece here, turning heads in fall camp and making a strong case to receive his fair share of touches for a potential high-volume offense. There's also a quote here, Dudley speaking to Trent Dilfer, the head coach of the Blazers, says, he's been everything we hoped for and more. We knew the character, we knew the work ethic, knew the ability to get more explosiveness and more twitch than anybody. So just something to note there. I know folks, as we've said before, have been very high on Jermaine Brown Jr., understandably so. But my opinion coming in, and perhaps there's a little bit of evidence now to back it up, there are going to be other running backs in the mix there as well. So we'll see how it shakes out. We'll, of course, keep our ear to the ground, reading reports as much as we can, not just these group of 5 teams, but of course we'll have a lot to discuss this evening as well at the Power 5 level. I'm sure Michael Penix will be part of that, and many, many more in addition. So this will be it for this AM episode of C2-A-Days. Nicholas Ian Allen for CampusToCanton.com. Thank you very much. Have a great day. We'll see you this evening.